Some years ago, I decided to embark upon a full exploration of menstruation and its spiritual and creative applications and effects. This could be seen as a very 1960s, 1970s way of reclaiming my body, and perhaps it was. Magical practice is something which encompasses every aspect of self, and knowing myself meant knowing how my body worked. As a woman in my 30s, as I was at that time, looking at my menstrual cycle seemed to be the obvious starting point. Also, I was somewhat dissatisfied by the related information I came across in my research, which was too often presented by men, and occasionally women, with a not unbiased agenda. I also found that whilst recognition and utilization of the phases of the moon and their different influences is a norm in most ritual practices, working with the menstrual cycle and the blood produced is not. I will not deny that Kenneth Grant's interpretation of the 11th degree of the OTO as heterosexual sex with a menstruating woman, rather than the standard interpretation of anal sex, and his work with colours, is definitive. However, knowledge of his work is not mainstream in either theory or practice within the magical community. An interesting and I feel relevant point was presented by Paul Katzaf in his book Moon Madness. It is known and recorded that acts of violence intensify on the full moon. However, what is less known is that it is documented there's also a great rise in violence, but towards the self rather than towards others, at the time of the new moon. The reason I've pointed this out is to illustrate cycles of the moon charting relationships between yourself and the world around you. This seemed to me to be a good reference point for my explorations, looking at different phases of the menstrual cycle and how they affect the ability to relate both inwardly and outwardly. To gain a wider perspective, I drew up a questionnaire which was answered by women from a variety of geographical, cultural and spiritual perspectives. I also quizzed men about their experiences with menstrual blood and working with and around a partner's cycle. The questionnaires and resultant in-depth conversations help give me a wider perspective and also further fuel the obsession which I find is necessary to do such research. As this was such a broad topic, I tried to be as specific as possible, primarily dealing with the days prior to and days actual of menstruation. The 3 days prior to menstruation are potentially the greatest times of power for all types of magical application, particularly those concerned with the working with others. What can mask itself as PMT in modern-day terminology is actually an intense power that can be used for focused ritual. However, the need for training and guidance could be seen to be essential, and, as indicated above, rest and meditation, as due to a conditioned perception of the onset of menstruation as a time of instability, a tendency towards delusion is possible, which could create difficulty with any sort of in-depth magical work. This delusion could be seen to manifest on an earthly level as a form of bodily discomfort and a twisted self-image, which contradicts the rise in sex drive, which is calling for a celebration and an expression of the profound level of energy that is available. This is an ideal time to do sexual magical workings, as the surge of power can carry the woman and any working partner or partners to previously inaccessible areas of exploration. When menstruation proper starts, the woman will feel a need to consolidate energy for herself, in the first 3 days anyway. This is an ideal time for scrying, astral work, divination of every sort, meditation and personal rituals. However, I feel great care is needed at this time in work of a sexual nature if communing with entities or astral manifestations. At this point in the cycle, a woman becomes like a battery of sorts, where she gives out energy but will have great difficulty recharging herself. Thus, there is a greater risk of obsessive magical relations and consequent drainage on the part of the female practitioner occurring. Aside from excessively low energy levels, in my experience and that of other women I've talked to, an obsessive sexual relationship on an astral level can manifest as exhaustion, swollen and overly sensitive genitalia, hypersexuality, and an inability to have sexual relations on an earthly level and achieve satisfaction. At this point in the cycle, the ability to travel between worlds is at its peak. However, the vulnerability in this travel is greatest. I find that if this sort of work is going to be done, it's necessary to access some sort of otherworldly help pre-journey. An alternative is to have your magical partner on hand to help ground you post-travelling. This grounding is often as simple as being held and touched with love. The recognition of there being unconditional love existing on this plane can aid the ability to extract oneself from others. The knowledge that there's earthings such as this can also give it an even greater freedom in travel in its generation of a feeling of safety. Blood deities are difficult to deal with, whatever the source of blood, and it always needs to be borne in mind the emotional attachment that is connected with the blood in question. As a woman gets older, for instance, her menstruation may hold with it connotations on some levels attached with, say, the aging process, or perhaps failed attempts at pregnancy, that would be detrimental if not acknowledged and dealt with before any ritual commences. If there's no awareness of these emotional attachments, the blood can act as either a magnet of sorts to related negative entities, or twist perception of that which is contacted. Michelin Linden, author of Typhonian Teratomas, believes that menstrual blood carries a greater risk of attracting beings, called larvae, that are drawn to such blood and feed off it, and then move into the host body. This open portal invites such beings to come and stay, and Michelin theorizes that perhaps this is why a great many religious and spiritual practices are put aside during menstruation. It is quite normal for women in groups to unconsciously synchronize their cycles. However, the ability to change the timing of the menstrual cycle seems to occur on another level for some women. There are instances which show that as a woman becomes more skilled in working magically, she may find herself menstruating out of cycle at the commencement of a ritual. In theory, as one's experience of magical practice increases, so does the knowledge about one's body and its potentiality. This includes the knowledge of how powerful working within the first 3 days of menstruation can be, which stimulates the onset of bleeding, thus making of herself the ultimate sacrifice, herself in entirety. Menstrual blood being used with intent I find to be a very personal thing as to results. I have had debates with various practitioners over this matter, and have come to the decision, as previously mentioned, the blood holds with it various aspects and attachments that come from the owner. Therefore the nature of it will be appreciated on other levels just as individually. I personally find menstrual blood to be one of the safer fluids used in offerings. There seems less chance of it being used as a bridge for an entity to cross over to this realm to cause havoc, as there is with the use of venous blood. I find it works well for drawing sigils, although I think that sexual fluids work better for the actual charging of said sigil, and it's excellent for scrying with. It is also very good to feed servitors with, although I find the alternation with other substances is best, and I have found that servitors fed in this manner have never, touch wood, caused me problems. In my personal experience, however, I've found that consistently feeding the same substance to an entity or servitor is unwise, as it can open the way to an unbalanced and obsessive relationship where control is taken from the hands of the practitioner. The more obvious signs of this loss of control being a constant pull to contact the entity in question that overrides the will and the desire of the practitioner. Baking with intent is also another one of my favourites. A variation on cakes of light, there's nothing like a smattering of menstrual blood and focused stirring to create transformational food. This type of food can be used in rituals, celebrations, and for creating a unified consciousness in any group, or for effecting change in one's life, either in general or on a deeper level. Almost needless to say, it's ideal to use when working with Hecate, Lilith, or feminine embodiments of deities, and also in its more well-known sexual alchemical applications when mixed with semen, some of which have been previously mentioned. It has many traditional uses which are found to be very effective, such as love charms and the feeding of magical plants, such as mandrake, and it's also been cited as the main ingredient in medieval potions to cause mania, idiocy, and catalepsy. Almost needless to say, using blood of any sort holds with it, especially since the rise of blood-borne illnesses, a great measure of personal responsibility and respect in its use. However, this responsibility in theory should be a given with any sort of magical practice. The study of blood in this context has been an initiation, not just in terms of knowledge and understanding of myself and the relationship with that which operates around me on every plane, but in creating a depth within my practice and a connectivity which I believe could not have been achieved otherwise. Exploring and knowing the essence of that which can be considered demonic gives one a power over it, and removes the need for exorcism, and replaces it, as with the Tsar rituals, with a symbiotic and what can be a very beneficial magical relationship.